Hello everyone, Maven here, and last clip of Roller-Derby Disco Dodgeball for a while, cause this is the last clip I had pre-recorded before flying out to Wyoming. But today I'd like to take the opportunity to talk to you about what I guess I'd call desire moderation. Basically, a sort of realization I came to within the past few months. In case you didn't hear in some of the previous videos, I am very much a chronic depressive. Not exactly the most emotionally balanced of individuals, I'll go ahead and admit that, but I've made great strides over quite a few years. And this year, I'd have to say, is probably one of the first times I've really felt comfortable about just the way I am and how to sort of balance myself. And a lot of that has to do with that desire moderation I was talking about. I used to be extremely focused on one or two things. Usually it was people, just being there, being around people, engaging with new types of people, learning about people, and then being useful. And it wasn't anything that I could produce, because I'd had a lot of my joys killed rather early on. I used to write a lot of poetry and short stories. Those kind of got shunned for a bit. I used to be really big role player. Do anything roleplay related. That got killed pretty quick. And I used to, before this realization, be a massive gamer, but even that started to just dry up. And I didn't know why until much later. Anytime I get stuck in a rut, the only thing I could really figure out to do and how to sort of, gain some sort of willpower to go forward, to continue on with things, was just passively absorbing other people's experiences. Watching Let's Players was one of the first things I did. Possibly what ended up creating a lot of inspiration for the channel. But I also did things like, just browsed social media sites, looked at other people's lives, was just this passive observer. And I won't say that that's a bad thing. Heck, I love doing those things even still. But what they were doing was passive. It was very passive. And I had all this energy that just ended up going back to self-hate and depression and just a really bleak outlook on things. So, earlier in 2015, sometime around February or March, I just came back from a really good social experience, MagFest. Really heavily recommended if you're in the DC metro area, anywhere near Maryland or that stuff, check out MagFest. It's wonderful. But that being said, I just came back from that, and I had that sort of post-con depression, but that quickly spiraled out of control. It was not manageable, and it ended up wrecking a lot of my potential. I missed my initial prospective graduation date, and that's a big milestone to miss. That's a lot of money. College is a lot of money, and grad school is absolutely not an exception to that. And that just ended up depressing me even more, because I'm always worried about being a burden. So I was absolutely maddened by this, and I realized I didn't have anything I could really back up on. I had a couple of really good friends, but I don't think I really ended up just, recognizing how good friends they were until a few months later, where I was like, oh my gosh, I've been taking so many things for granted. So one of the things I realized was I've always been a very intellectual person. I've always been very forward-looking. I've always been about working towards the future. And as a result, I kind of just dismissed out of hand hedonism. sort of the pursuit of desire in the moment. And because I was thinking, everything I've ever read, intellectually wise, just sort of speaks down on hedonism. There was those couple of Greek philosophers that were all about it, but then after that, it's like, no, there must be something greater, it must be something bigger. And ironically, a lot of anthropology, all of anthropology's sort of motto of things in balance, nothing all the way one way or the other. There's this mishmash of factors. I never really processed that into my own life, into my own emotions, into my own philosophy. And so, when it came down to it, I was sort of faced with this thought, this realization of, I never really did try hedonism. I never did try to embrace this sort of willingness to be living in the present. And a lot of that, I think, is because I thought of it as this sort of thing you just have to all out. Because, when I thought of living in the present, I thought of, people who go out drinking every day, who, use recreational drugs constantly, who just, never go anywhere in life. Which is silly, because they're enjoying themselves. I can't knock that, especially not as an anthropologist. And especially not as just a human being who's so inherently unhappy with the way they were. And it was like, well, if they're happy, why can't I just have a part of that happiness during the down times when, these grander schemes of happiness aren't working out for me? Because I wasn't being productive during that point. I wasn't, helping people. I wasn't being useful. I was just there. And I needed something to keep me going and give me energy. Give me something to look forward to in the short term, so that I could have all that energy to then do stuff in the long term. And that's when I was like, okay, I can give this a shot. I can do this. So I started trying to eat out more, just, at restaurants and stuff. I started hanging out with friends more often, I even, I'm not the type of person that usually likes to invite people over, because I always feel like I'm intruding. But I actually started doing that more often. Just living in the moment, being, And then I started playing games again. Because it's like, well, if I don't have to worry about being productive or helping someone else have fun with, in a game, it doesn't have to be a multiplayer game. I can play single-player games again. And it was such a rush. And it was like, oh man, now I can see, why the more, visceral, the more emotive side of me loved playing games. And I can also be this intellectual and analyze and critique them as I wanted. But I found this love of games again, and I was like, oh man, this is great. I want to share my excitement with people. And that's when I realized, I'm like, wait, I can figure out how to make, this OBS program work. I can figure out how to do, a little bit of audio engineering, just very basic stuff. I can figure this out. And I can make a Let's Play channel. And I'd already had a channel up for little gaming clips because of NVIDIA shadow capture. But I'd never really gone on my way to do this. And all that excitement, all that relearned love of games gave me all this energy to become a Let's Player. To become someone who could just play games, share clips, talk with people, hang out with people on a Twitch channel, anything like that. And that then in turn gave me energy to be an anthropologist again. To be this sort of forward-reaching person. I finished my thesis. I solidified friendships I thought I'd left behind a long time ago. I became a lot more confident. I began wanting to rebuild all of these huge amounts of skills that I'd left abandoned for so long. And it's all so important, and it all bundled up together. And it was just that little taste that little taste of those short-term desires, those short-term hedonistic pleasures that gave me that sort of snowball, that sort of pushed me. And it was so giving myself permission to be more interested and more and able to get pleasure from a number of different sources. It was so much of a change. And now I'm making more progress in all of the areas that I thought really did cause me, to really were worth pursuing. I'm making progress professionally, I'm making progress socially, and I'm actually beginning to be useful again. And it's so exciting. You don't understand how amazing it is to be someone who's so depressive and then look back and say, wow, I did all of this just because I was able to give myself permission to be happy again, to enjoy things again. And it just goes to show you that nothing is good in excess. Even the most altruistic, hopeful, inspired, talent-developing, you can be a paragon, but if you have all those weaknesses, if you have these vulnerabilities, there's no such thing as, as living completely for one pleasure. I think even the most paragon, even the most saintly of individuals has to have something that they can just look back on and just appreciate for what it is. And not have to worry about these grand schemes working out to validate themselves. You don't have to validate yourselves based on success or based on, numerics or follower counts, subscriber counts, likes on your Facebook posts. You don't even have to qualify yourself by grades. And all those things are important and valuable, and you can get pleasure from those. And I actively encourage you to look to the future. I actively encourage you to help other people, to live not just for yourself, to always be building something greater. But it's okay. It's okay to have these basic pleasures. And it's okay to give yourself permission to be happy. You just always have to moderate all of your desires. Just everything is best in moderation. And if you give yourself too much to one thing, what happens to that one thing collapses? You can't live purely for one thing. So it's okay to give in to those, more temporary measures. As long as you know that that's not always going to be the case, that there's always something better to build towards. And that philosophy is true in everything. It's not structure, it's not just, agency, it's both. It's not just hedonism, it's not just altruism, it's both. It's okay to be both. It's okay to be balanced. Give yourself that permission. So thank you guys for letting me ramble about these things. I hope you guys learned something too. And I'll see you guys in the next video.